Thanks for tuning in to Heartland Makes and Outdoors. In today's video, we're going to kind of go through what we do to test to make sure that everything's working properly before we fire this up inside of our wood shop or our leather shop. We had an incident with one last year. I think it was a fluke. It's not something that always happens, but these are things that we're going to do from now on to make sure our equipment's working before we fire it up inside. And then also we're going to cover some of your questions from the videos we posted last year. We're also going to be explaining to you some other tips and tricks and what we're going to be using when we go to camp to do our 2.5, maybe 3 week camping trip this winter. So let's get to the video. Okay, so I have to start out by saying this. We've been using buddy heaters for well over 20 years now. We use our big buddy heater in both the wood shop and the leather shop, and we use it all winter long. That's our main heat source, and that's just what we use in our shop. So if you guys did watch the video that we posted last year, and I'll put a link up here so you guys can check that out. I kind of go over things to do when you're putting your heater up for storage at springtime. It's now fall, we're getting these back out. I have done the things that I mentioned in our other video, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go through a real quick list. Number one, you wanna get a pair of gloves out, and you may be asking why. Well, last year when we started ours up for the test run before we went to deer camp last year, it actually caught on fire. Something had corroded. So that's gonna be the first thing that we're gonna check with our heaters is we're gonna, number one, you wanna open up your doors. As you open the doors, we're going to be looking up here, make sure that this valve is corrosion free, and then the same thing on the other side. We're going to flip it around, and again, this is the super big buddy or whatever they call it, big buddy or something like that. But then you've also on this other side, if you do have the big buddy, you've got a spot for two different valves. We're making sure there's no corrosion on that. You can see it's corrosion free. And then also look up here, this is where the quick connect hose goes to. Again, we're good, a little bit of dust here. Always get you a little rag and just kind of wipe that little bit of dust out. Again, this has been in storage all summer. It's been in the original box and the original plastic wrapper, and I did add extra silicone packets this year because of the amount of corrosion we had on the one from the previous year. Next thing you want to do is turn it around to the front. And then we're going to double check everything up here and make sure that all this looks good. And it does. It's nice and clean. I did blow this out with the little air blower. It did have a little bit of residual dust in it, and that's just to be expected. Next thing that we're going to do is if you have the bigger buddy like this one, and that's the one that actually I had the incident with the year prior, it had the compartment. This is the battery compartment. Now, the one we had before did not have the fan in it, but you want to make sure, number one, that you don't store this over the summer with batteries in it because it'll lead to corrosion. And I don't care what kind of batteries you got, they'll start corroding, especially in excess heat. But you want to look in here real good and make sure that you don't have any corrosion back here. Again, the one that I had the previous year the problem with, and I think it was just a quirk, guys, we had corrosion all over, and it, well, but anyways, that's what we're checking for today. Make sure we don't have a bunch of excess corrosion. Check the battery compartment, and then check where your propane. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and again make sure that you've got gloves handy just in case something happens, like what happened last year. We're going to hook the propane, the quick connect, up. And this is if you're using the larger 20-pound tanks or whatever they call them, you can hook it up that way. And now it's a quick connect. The question was brought up last year, hey, I'm getting high flames up here on the top. And I'm going to show you with this one, because this hose here actually has the regulator built in. It will keep that flame from coming way up high where it's not supposed to be. But the buddy heater does sell their specific filters, which are supposed to eliminate any of the oils or goop or whatever causes the problem to where you can't keep your pilot light lit. And my question was to Mr. Buddy Heater, if they watch this, Why do you not need the filter on the quick connect hose, but your other $40 hose that doesn't have a regulator to it, you have to use the filter? Again, that's just a question. I don't know. I'm not a propane expert, and you would not be surprised how many propane experts we had who commented on the last video. You guys go read the comments. It'll crack you up. I don't think there's that many propane engineers. Now, the reason that I kind of paused for a little bit, what we're doing right now is we've got the LP is on. We've got the LP on. We just hooked up the quick connect. And I'm basically smelling for propane. And I think if I would have smelt for propane last year, I might have smelt wherever it was leaking back here in the back, where the hose, the metal hose in the back that you can't get to because it's in this case, had corroded over. I may not have had the problem that I did last year. But now that we know that we can't smell any propane, we're going to go ahead and fire this thing up and make sure that it's working. This one does have the electric igniter on it. And again, this is straight out of storage from last year. There was air in that line, so it took quite a bit of time for all that air to come out and finally get the pilot light lit. You can see the pilot light's lit, and I'll try to zoom in. I know it's daylight out here, so it may be harder to see that. But the pilot light's lit, nothing's smoking or out of the ordinary up here. Let's go ahead and put it on low. And they tell you in the directions that you want to let your pilot light stay lit for at least 30 seconds to a minute or whatever before you try to turn this on. That gives your everything time to pre-warm up, if you will. It's very especially important in the cold. You can't really see this because it is daylight out here, but I can feel the heat coming off of that already. And then the next thing that we want to check is we're going to go ahead and put it on over to high. Make sure that nothing's smoking. You can see this panel over here is already starting to kick some heat out, and it's kind of turning pink right now. So that's all good. That's all real good. One thing I did want to point out while we're just kind of letting this run through the cycle, if you guys are unaware, there's a lot of people that are refilling these 1 pound bottles. Number one, I don't think you're supposed to refill these. If you do refill them, you might check into some of these brass caps. They've got a rubber deal in it that will help keep it from leaking. That's part of the reason these are not made to be refilled, is this little valve. When you go to push it to let the air out as you're filling it, it won't always seal back up properly. And guys, don't refill these. I'm just going to tell you, it's not safe and it's dangerous. And then next up, if you're adamant about refilling your own, Flame King makes some. These are designed to be refilled, and I'm not going to do a video on how to refill them because it even tells you right here on the label, danger, blah, blah, blah. So if you don't know what you're doing, don't refill them. You're not going to save that much money. Again, this heater's working great, just like it's supposed to, and just like all the ones in the past. Like I said, last year I think the one we had was a fluke. Next up, if you do not have the fan, this one's got the fan built in, and I already showed you we've checked it for corrosion. I don't have batteries in it. I'll go over here and I'll show you. Let me put the batteries in real quick, and you can kind of hear this little fan working. And it takes 4 D-sized batteries. So if you're going to be camping for 2 weeks, or if you're using this thing all winter long like we do in the leather shop or the archery shop or the wood shop or whatever you want to call it, it can get really expensive running those D batteries. But as you can hear, the fan's blowing. You can see the fan's blowing. And we're going to let that go ahead and cool off because we're done testing that. So we'll leave the fan on, let everything cool down back to temperature like it should. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to show you the little baby buddy. And I don't know what they call this one, but it's the mini buddy. This one doesn't have as many features to it, but it's really great if you're using it like in a small bathroom, something like that. Again, we've already tested it. We've looked for corrosion in all the spots where you'd look. And it's pretty simple. You just kind of push the button and it either comes on or it don't. And we've got the little pilot light down here. It is lighting up like it's supposed to. And then after, again, 30 seconds with your pilot light, you can let that go, and then this will automatically start heating up the little element. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but that blue flame's down at the bottom. This thing's already starting to heat up. I can feel it. So we'll back this camera up. I don't want to melt my camera. But again, that's all we're doing, guys, is we're just testing these things to make sure that they work properly. They're firing up. It's not leaking fuel, anything like that. Now, back to the battery deal. Yeah, that's cooled off enough that I can touch it. I'm going to show you this real quick. You don't need a fancy stand. And again, this isn't a product made by Buddy Heater, but it's something that I started using last year. We used it at deer camp, and it's this little, it's a twin blade fan that works off of heat. Again, the same thing with this is you're getting it out of storage. You just want to make sure it's dust free. I used the original packing that it came in, just saved this box. That's also what I use for traveling, but you can kind of set it up here. And again, it's not going to start spinning because the heater's off. But that'll save you a ton of money in batteries. I think this little unit was like $35, $45, something like that. But it works phenomenal. This is the same thing that I used on our wood burning winter ale stove in the tent last year as well. I'd get the winter ale up and running and set this on it, and then it would blow heat all through that tent, which is a 12 by 10 by 12, 10 by 14, 10 by 14 tent is what it is, canvas tent. Phenomenal tent. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you up front, guys, here's what we did last year. We took the winter ale stove with us to deer camp last year, and I'm telling you right now, it's a whole nother toolbox essentially of gear that you need, between the pipe, spark arrestor, the deal to exit the tent, and everything else. What we're going to do this year is I'm scrapping that whole fireplace, because the trip back to Oklahoma is more of a hunting trip than a camping trip. For camping, I'm keeping my winter ale because there's nothing better. But like in the morning when you wake up and it's really cold, we were firing up the Buddy Heater, knocking the chill off in the tent, getting dressed, going out and hunting, and then when we came back at the nighttime, we'd fire up the winter ale. It's going to be a lot less stuff for me to take. I'm just going to take my big Buddy Heater, and then I'm going to take the little Buddy Heater. And that's how we're going to run at deer camp this year. I hope that some of this you found helpful information, things to check for to keep you safe with your Buddy Heater, especially if you're getting it out of storage and it's been stored since last year. I never had any problems when I lived in Oklahoma using these things for 5 or 6 or 10 years. But for whatever reason, and like I said, it may have been a fluke last year, that one was 1 season old, and we had a fire problem with it. And then also, one of the newer ones that my buddy had bought, he brought it to deer camp 2 years ago. He used it in his pickup camper that we converted. I've got a video on that if you guys want to watch a really cool camper conversion, a pickup bed camper conversion. But he used that heater, and we had a cold front coming in. I was going to be there a whole nother week, and I bought his from him. He had only used it a handful of days, and that thing didn't last a week. Again, I think it was a fluke. Haven't had any problems with the Buddy Heaters. I haven't even tried to look for a different company that makes them, because I've had such good luck with the Buddy Heaters. Guys, comment down below. Tell us what your success rate's been with your Buddy Heaters. And I know that the video we posted last year was kind of a fluke, but after last year, I'll never fire one of these up inside the house again or inside the shop again without testing it outside first. I did have my gloves here handy just in case I needed to grab it and run. I've got a water tank right behind the camera that I could throw it in if need be. And then I've also got a 5-gallon bucket right behind the camera in case I needed it. Thankfully, nothing happened. I didn't suspect anything would happen because this thing is corrosion free. If you guys like camping like we do, and you like tent camping, and or you've been thinking about converting a small trailer, like a utility trailer, into a camper, we're going to be posting a series of videos on our conversion, because Buster and I are going to be taking a 5x10 enclosed trailer. We've already started the process of turning it into a mini camper. That's another reason we're taking the mini buddy heater, because if we get those icy, sleety days, it'll be much easier to keep the small space warm than it would the big tent. And while I'm talking about it and thinking about it, you don't have to be a camper to understand the importance of these buddy heaters. Look at all the storms that are happening. We've got hurricane season going on right now. I understand most of the country is warm, but it is getting to them cooler nights. These are indoor safe. It would be a great thing to have in your kit for emergency preparedness. Back in Oklahoma, we had tornadoes all the time. Occasionally, most of them were in the springtime, but occasionally you'd have one or two in the fall that would kick up. These are just good items to have. That way you can heat your room up, heat whatever you need to. While we're talking about the safety, they do have an oxygen sensor built in. If the oxygen level is too low, it will kick off. I believe it has a CO2 sensor built in. That I can't swear to. If you guys are propane professionals or buddy heater professionals, comment down below, let us all know. Does it have a CO2 sensor built in? I believe it does, but it's just another thing that you could have. You don't have to be a camper to use these. You don't have to be a fisherman to use one of these in your boat. Keep it in your house. Put this in your bedroom or your bathroom. If you lose electricity because of an ice storm, you can keep your bathroom relatively warm to keep your pipes from freezing up. Same thing with the heater. Put it in the main house. Put it in your kitchen so your pipes ain't freezing up. It's just another tool to have at your disposal. Again, we appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I look forward to reading your comments. I hope you all have a blessed week. And let's get outside and make something happen.